Hello, writerly friends! Today I wanted to talk about the idea of writer's block. Writer's block, particularly when it comes to the first sentence of a story. Not knowing where to start or how to start is actually a feeling that is pretty common amongst writers. So I thought, you know what? Let's actually sit down and talk about my top 3 ways to overcome writer's block on the first sentence. Before I give you those 3 tips though, allow me to give you the formal disclaimer and remind you that the following is merely just my opinion, my advice, and what worked for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as my point of view on this particular issue. Now, my first tip is actually the weirdest of the bunch. It's gonna be a little far out, but I want you to follow along with me, okay? I discovered this first tip a long time ago, and ever since I did, it's been helping me a lot. And what is that tip? It's very simple. Find out who your narrator is. Now, this may seem really straightforward in stories that are first-person narration, in which, of course, you know who the person narrating is, but I think that this is most effective for stories that are third-person narration. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, who is narrating this story? Because you may be thinking to yourself, oh, well, there's nobody because it's third person, but I disagree, actually. I think that regardless of the story you're writing, someone is telling the story. There is a narrator, and this person has a personality, a voice, and a way to tell a story. I know it seems a little far out, but it's helped me a lot to come into a story that is third-person narration and ask myself, who is the person narrating this story? You know, it could be a ghost, a concept, an idea, a cosmic creature, an elder god. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you look at this person who happens to be a character within this universe and ask yourself, how would they begin telling this story? Again, I know this may seem really strange, but it has worked wonders for me because you come into a story knowing this hidden character that, you know, the readers may never hear about and may never realize who they really are, but you know, and you know that this character has a personality and a voice and a way to tell a story that makes it different than everyone else. And thus, coming in with that secret color, that secret persona, gives you a little edge because you know, okay, how would this person begin telling the story? I can only speak from my experience, but ever since I began using this, I've been able to come into a story with a lot more color and a lot more feeling because it becomes less daunting. It's less about me against the white page and asking myself, okay, how do I begin this overwhelming task of starting a story? It becomes a little easier when I have a friend with me, the voice of the person who's trying to tell this story, and I just simply enter their mind, enter their voice, and begin telling the story as they would. Again, finding out who the narrator of your story is and getting in their character can go a long way. Now for a tip that is definitely less far out. There is a really famous John Steinbeck quote, and it talks about the idea of not writing for an audience, but rather writing for one person in particular. The overall point of the quote is that John Steinbeck believed it was better to write with the idea of one person in mind, whether it's a real person or not, as opposed to writing towards an audience, because it made the story feel a lot more personal, a lot more intimate, as though a friend was sharing a story with you. Do I think this works? Well, it is my number 2 tip for how to overcome writer's block on the first sentence. Become the storyteller. Seriously, just like the previous tip focuses on the idea of discovering who's telling the story, entering the mindset of somebody who is telling a story goes a long way as well. It's the idea of sitting down and imagining someone, the one person you want to share the story with, whether they're a real person or not a real person, and entering that mindset. If I was to share this story with that person, how would they like the story to begin? And I can't help but agree because it's worked so well for me. It makes the story feel a lot more personal and a lot more intimate because it does feel as though someone is sharing this story with you. Not a stadium worth of people, but one person telling you one story. Just like the previous tip, this one deals with the idea of dealing with the opening of the story, and in this case, by using a point of reference, someone you're telling the story to, and having this point of reference can really help because it's giving you a solid point to start from. How would they like me to start the story? Where would they like the story to go? It gives you a whole new view and a whole new point of reference. Again, what do I think is my second tip for overcoming writer's block in the first sentence? Become the storyteller. Imagine a person you're sharing the story with, one person, whether they're a real person or not, and ask yourself, how would they like me to start the story? What sort of stories do they like, and how can I make this the best story for that one person? Now, moving on, you may have noticed, wow, those 2 first tips deal a lot with getting in the mindset, and you may have realized as well, wow, there's not a lot of hard rules here, because, you know, you will find on the internet people telling you, do this and don't do that, and while I do agree that there's merit behind some of those ideas, and not merit behind others, I like to rather teach you theory, teach you ways to get yourself there, because telling you what to do and what not to do tends to put walls in people's minds, and writing is an art without walls, without rules, and I think that inspiring you to get in that mindset helps. And adding on to that, my third and final tip deals with the final barrier that you're going to be dealing with when starting a story. And of course, as always, this is not a writing tip, this is a writer tip, because I've found that a lot of writing problems are actually writer problems, because the problem is in the writer themselves. And this is a good thing, because it means that you yourself have the tools and the power to overcome this problem. So what is this final barrier that my third tip is going to help you overcome? Allow me to take you there. There is one thing that bothers me about traditional writing and just, writing in general, and it's the idea that English teachers and creative writing teachers and pretty much anyone who's trying to get you to write an essay pushes the idea of having the first sentence be a hook and a perfect idea that grabs the reader and just gets a hold of them and pushes them to read the rest of the story. And there is a merit behind this. I am not disagreeing with that. What I am disagreeing with is the idea that this needs to be perfect right from the start. Yes, there is merit to the idea of wanting to grab your reader with a really good, strong opening line, but that thought, that value, has no place in the act of writing the first draft of your story. Now allow me to take my metaphorical hammer and bash down this wall. What is my third and most important writing tip for overcoming the writer's block on the first sentence? You can make it perfect later. For those of you who are new to my channel, allow me to explain myself. I've been running a writing advice blog for 3 years now, and I get like dozens upon dozens of questions every day, and a big chunk of them, and I'm not kidding, a big chunk of them, deal with people being afraid that their first line is not strong enough. Now, of course, like many problems in writing, this one is, of course, not only a problem to the first line, but through the idea of the entire first draft. I get so many people sending me messages of how worried they are and how they can't start writing because they want it to be perfect. I get so many messages from people who are worried, almost scared of not getting the first line right the first time. And, the truth is that it doesn't matter. I mean it doesn't matter. Even if you were to nail and write to the most perfect first line of all time, you would still revise it. So I think you understand, and those of you who've been following my blog for ages know that this is one of the big pieces of advice that I give out all the time, and it is that the story can wait. You can wait for perfection, because no matter how great you think you've nailed it, you're still gonna have to revise it later. Now, I know that a couple of you are probably disagreeing with me, and that's entirely okay. We're all different writers in this different medium, but allow me to tell you a story. Not so long ago, I wrote a book titled Justine's Blood, a paranormal story with a lot of supernatural elements, and a lot of people have read it. And ironically, you may read the story and you would not realize the truth, and that is that the first chapter you read, the first line that you read in the story, is not the original first line of the story. When I originally wrote Justine's Blood, there was an extra half a page of description that I added to the beginning to try to smooth the opening, and I thought it was alright the first time I wrote it. When I finished the first draft, I thought, okay, this is pretty good. But, of course, when I came to the revision pass and I began to look at it, I realized, you know what, this is not working. This is a little too puffy. This is slowing down the beginning of the story. What do I do? What do I do? Oh my god, I spent so long working out this perfect first line, and now what do I do with it? Do I rework it? It's still puffy. What can I do? And I realized, you know what? What would happen if maybe, just maybe, I chopped off about this much of the first page? And I thought it was a ridiculous thought, because, I had spent so long trying to get that first line right. And there came a point in the revision process when I thought, you know what? I want the story to be more successful than I care about that first line that I came up with. So I chopped it out. My beta readers never read that first opening. And when they got it, they came back to me and told me, wow, I really like the opening. I think it's really strong. And that is, in a nutshell, the irony of first lines. Now, there's something I want you to take from this, okay? If you take one thing from this video, let it be this, okay? No one, and I do mean no one, is going to read the first draft of your story unless you choose to let them see the first draft of your story, which I would urge you against. I think that you should let your story, sit down, and then come back and revise the story. Revise it, refine it, edit it, polish it, and let it become what you originally wanted it to be. You can choose to share the story when it is polished, when it is as close to perfection as you can humanly make it. I find that a lot of writers, young and old, get stuck with this idea of wanting their first draft to be the same level of quality of the books they grew up reading. And this is unrealistic at best because those books that you enjoyed reading when you were younger were polished and revised and edited with real editors who get paid money to edit the book. But the biggest irony of all is that those books had time to become perfect. The writers gave it time and a little bit of tender love, care, and revising and polishing and editing, and then they made the story as close to perfection as humanly possible. And you know what the best part of all of this is? Is that you too, as well, can give your story time. Now, some of you may have realized, wow, these pieces of advice deal more with the idea of getting in the mindset to write as opposed to what you should or should not do on the first line. And that is because, I'm not gonna lie to you, during the first draft, that first line doesn't matter because you're gonna have to end up cleaning it up, which is the entire point of tip number 3. Give your stories time. Your story has to begin somewhere, the same way that trees don't bear fruit on the first day. You have to give things a little bit of time. And remember, perfection can wait. Perfection can wait until you are certain that you're ready to share the story with other people. And the best part of this process of writing a story, keeping it a secret, hiding it from the world, and then when it's ready, showing it to people, is that people look at it and they think you're a prodigy. They look at it and they think, wow, you're a natural. This is so good and so polished. And in reality, you're doing what the pros are doing, which is keep things silent, give things time, give things a little bit of tender loving care, revise them, edit them, polish them, make them the best possible, and then share them with the world. And everyone will think that you're a prodigy. Seriously, between you and me, do you seriously think that your favorite authors worry about getting the first line right the first time? Like, seriously, do you think they worry about that? Now, if you don't mind, allow me to summarize for you my top 3 tips for overcoming writer's block on the first sentence. Tip number 1, find the narrator's voice. Tip number 2, become the storyteller. Find one person, whether it is real or not, that you would like to share this story with and write it as though you were telling them that story. And number 3, best of all, my number 1 tip basically of all time is give the story time. It can be perfect later. And I hope that helps. I actually really do hope that helps. I get a lot of messages, and I do get a lot of messages, and I get so many questions nowadays, and a lot of them deal with writers being stuck right at the beginning because they're afraid that the story won't be perfect. And it's come to the point now where I'm doing like the coach thing, like I'm sitting on the sidelines going, it doesn't matter, you can make it perfect later, go kill him. I don't know what sport I'm imagining in my head, a sport where you go out killing people. So I guess it's the Hunger Games. With that out of the way though. Pick me as your sponsor, District 1. Now you may be thinking to yourselves, wow Max, that sounds really big-headed of you to put yourself in District 1. I posted an ask a long time ago and like a bunch of people were like, yeah Max, you would be District 1. And I'm like, oh man, imagine the Hunger Games, but instead of like killing people, you like kill them with like dope rhymes. Max said, knowing entirely well that they lack the ability to rhyme. With that silliness out of the way, I do actually mean it. I hope the video helped, and if anything, it gave you another point of view. Again, I do find that it is best to dive into the story, to jump in. Yeah, you know, just like the water analogy. Yeah, it's gonna be cold and it's gonna be a shock when you first jump into the water, but the sooner you adjust yourself to the temperature of the water, the better things will be. I promise. With all of that said though, I wanna thank you for watching, like, subscribe, do all of the socially related things, and if you would like even more writing advice, you can head over to my official writing blog over at maxkieran.tumblr.com. I'm running out of breath. Anyways, I wanna thank you, yes you, for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I will be seeing you soon. Mwah. Hello there, welcome back to the outro. No editorial today because the video has gone on long enough, but instead let's make a little bit of a comments game. Feel free to go into the comments below and leave your own explanation for what district of the Hunger Games you think you would belong to. I think it's a really fun element of conversation, and do you agree with people? A lot of people told me in the past that I would be like District 1 because of my skills, I guess, and because I actually used to work with jewelry a long time ago. Fun fact. Feel free to leave in the comments below. What district do you think you would belong to? How long do you think you would last in the Hunger Games? And if you agree with me being on District 1. With all that silliness out of the way though, thank you for watching and I'll be seeing you soon.